Right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending where you're joining us from. And welcome to part 2 of this training course. I'm presuming that quite a few people here were here on Monday. If you weren't, then obviously you're going to be missing a few bits and pieces, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. You should still be able to work out everything that's important. Our aim today is to basically do some marking. Simple as that, just a bit of introductory stuff, but then after that it's very much hands-on, and it's absolutely essential you download the sample questions booklet. All right, that is very essential to this task. You don't have to have it on paper, but if you do have it on paper, it does have the benefit you can scribble all over it, but it is an awful lot of pages. I think it's 45 pages long, so you may not want to print it. But we're going to be using that right the way through the session after about the first quarter of an hour. So you've got plenty of time to download it and get it organized. If you can't manage it from the screen, which go to the bottom, as Faina told you to do, go to the bottom, look for the resources tab, click on the resources tab, then click on the documents tab, and you can download the documents that way, or you can follow the link which is in the chat window at the moment. Okay. Before we start, we have an answer to a question from last session. So I'm just going to stop sharing this screen and share a different screen because it's obviously a question several of you asked. So the Pearson lockdown browser. If you're using the link, Wissam, is in the chat, just above the chat you've just put in. Yeah, it's here again. Okay, there it is again. All right. The lockdown browser is for those of you who are using Chromebooks and you're wondering how you're going to use Chromebooks and still be on the internet. So please, will you investigate that? It's called the Pearson lockdown browser. And I'm going to just now put in a link. I hope I've copied it a long while back. Let's see if it will go. Yep. Here is a link to that page, okay, to the lockdown browser. So if you've been wondering about what am I going to do because I've got Chromebooks and now we've got problems that we can't be online and all the rest of it, well, hopefully that will answer all your questions. Oh, I sent it to Fina, sorry. Thank you, Fina. You sent it to everyone. Right, you now got the link. Okay, so you've had 2 links sent to you, one to the resources for today, and for those of you who are working on Chromebooks, one to the lockdown browser. Okay, so we covered that, and great. I'll stop sharing that. I'll go back to the slides. I will also okay, a few basic points here. If you have a problem, question, or whatever, please put it in chat, but don't miss what I'm saying being busy. I will stop many times during this one. When there's a break in the presentation and you're doing some marking, please save up your questions till then and put them in the chat so you're not missing out on something I'm saying. By all means, put questions in chat at any time, but preferably when there is an opportunity when we stop talking, when I shut up, basically. If you have any technical issues, Fina is monitoring this for us. And so you can also use chat to send her a direct message if you've got a problem. She will handle any technical issues and sort those out. So that's that covered. Currently, we have 33 delegates. We did get up to 60 on Monday, so I'm sure more will be arriving as we go along, and I will deal with them as they come along. As I told you on Monday, just me and Faina here running all this, so therefore do bear with us if there's the odd pause while we try and work something out or resolve a problem. And as before on Monday, if this system should go down for any reason, please stay logged in for a while and then re-log in, and you should be able to we'll be restarting it if it goes down. Likewise, if you find you've lost the sound, which seems to be a common problem, if you've lost the sound, then please will you re-log in, and you should find you've got your sound restored. Then it seems to be something that's happened a few times. Yes, there's a recording of module 1, and this is being sent out. There seems to be a bit of a delay on this, but you'll get an email with a link to the recording, and of course, again, a few days later, you'll get an email with a link to this recording. It used to be 24, 48 hours, but it seems to be more like 3 or 4 days now. Could you click the same Zoom link of that session for that recording? You could try it. I don't know. It's interesting. Yes, thank you. If you use your existing Zoom link, I hadn't thought about that, the one you had for the Monday's meeting, I think you can find it. You can then choose to see the recording. So that would be something I hadn't thought about. So in other words, you go back, you log in as if you were joining the meeting the first time, but this time you get a chance to see the recording. Maybe that's how it's happening now. Fina, perhaps you can update me on that. You're also, of course, going to get the PowerPoint slides, and you're also going to get a chance to evaluate it. I think as long as you've had a link, Emma, as long as someone sent you, you've had that link sent to you because you registered, you can still use that link to go to the meeting. Okay, so, but that is me guessing. So have a try, see what happens. Otherwise, if it's a problem and you had registered, later on we'll give you an email address where you can go and say, hey, please help, I need this. Okay, I think we're about ready to kick off. We've still got people joining, so that's one reason I'm taking my time, just to allow people to get settled in. We're up to 40 now, but just about. But I think we'll go. All right, we'll start the session. Right, you're going to lose the wonderful video of me because it hides things and other problems, and you've just got the slides. Okay. Aims and objectives of the qualification today, then look at the question types, then understand mark schemes. You're going to be doing marking some exemplar student work, which is in your sample questions booklet, and then we'll look at the support briefly. Things will move very fast at the start here because we've got a lot to do, so we're not going to hold about much time. You saw this slide on Monday, I won't repeat it. And here we have a quick brief overview. If you're just joining us for the first time, then just a reminder that paper 1 is a 2-hour traditional paper written. You send it off. It's been marked by a group of markers, depending on what the question is. Paper 2, again, you send off the paper-based element of it, but you upload the practical part of it, the files and so on, to learner work transfer. And that's how that's marked. Both of them carry 80 marks. Both of them are worth 50% of the final assessment grades. The assessment objectives are basically distinguishing things that we know. AO1, in other words, you can just say recall, factual, so on. Roughly a quarter of the marks. Round about 40% of the marks is to be the application of knowledge. So in other words, you take something you know, and you're going to then basically tell us something about it, do something with it, evaluate it, examine it, assess it, do something, the application of knowledge. And AO3 is the analyze the problem. So in other words, you're presented with some sort of problem, you take the knowledge you have and you apply that to make a new solution or improve a solution or to improve a piece of coding or whatever it might be. If you add together AO2 and AO3, you'll see you've got something like 72%. So basically, this is very much a doing qualification rather than a knowing qualification. Right? It's very much about being actively engaged and doing things and so on. This on itself, though, does give us a bit of a problem because this means that the variety of answers candidates can come up with is massive. And so part of the interesting thing about this qualification is anticipating all the potential ways in which someone might solve a problem, as you will see. Okay. Over the 2 papers, as you might have guessed, I'm sure that I won't dwell on this because I want to get moving on, but really the knowledge is really on paper 1 and the application is predominantly on papers 3. Yes. So you can see how it goes there. All right, now this might seem a funny thing to put up, but in fact on this slide are all the command words that we will use. They're all there. Okay, and this is sort of going to be very helpful, I hope, if you think about in terms of teaching English. I know you're not teaching English, but you do need to, because you do need to tell your candidates what all these words will mean. And as we go on today, as we go through looking at the marking, I will be looking at some of these words in specifics. Okay, but there's one word missing from there, which is often seen in our mark schemes, and that is artifact. All right, an artifact is any product. Anything that the candidate has made is called an artifact. That could be a piece of coding. It might be a flow chart, right? It could be a diagram or picture, a table. These are all called artifacts, all right? So you're not looking for something that's been buried in the ground for years if you're thinking of that type of artifact. Some words are very important, and one of the most important on there is explain, all right? And as I mentioned earlier, I think, I'm not sure, there's a magic word that goes with explain, and that is because. If a candidate is trying to write an answer which has explain at the start, they should try very, very hard to get the word because into their answer, because, as I've just done, that explains the question, right? That will be able to explain whatever they're answering. We'll look at that as we're going along in a minute and so on like that. Other ones on here are very, very simple, like write, for example, means nothing more than that. Simply do it, write it. All right, and you've got a few others like draw and give, which are very low order command words. So we'll look at how those work out in time. But if you've not done anything with your students about command words, can I recommend it's worth spending a lesson just before the exam on going through what all of these actually mean, supported by specific questions that use those command words. Here's a very simple answer one of explain. This is how we would look at explain. Now we are into using stuff that's in the sample questions booklet. So if you want to start getting organized, on page 2 of the sample questions booklet, page 2, sample questions booklet, you will find this same question. So everything from now on is somewhere in the sample questions booklet. I will tell you where as we go along. So you have a paper or a digital copy of it to look at. And the reason we're looking at it at this point is simply to look at this two-part marking. An explain question is often, not always, but pretty well always, 2 marks or 4 marks. And there's an expectation there will be a statement that gets the first mark, followed by some sort of expansion, the second mark. We use these 2 words, a statement followed by an expansion. So in our mark scheme, in answer to that question, explain why a person attempting to gain unauthorized access to a network computer sometimes benefit the owner of the network. Security vulnerabilities in the network are exposed, 1 mark, by someone who is paid, rewarded to do it, ethical hacker, 1 mark. Right? Now, sometimes the second question, part of the answer, is dependent on the initial statement. Okay? So in this example, they are clearly, you can't mess about taking the second half of one answer and putting it with the first half of another answer, right? They have to follow on from each other, okay? But it can be also that sometimes they can be mix and match, as it's called. In other words, you can say, well, actually, that expansion will still work with both that answer and a different answer. In this case, you could see how the second part of the first bullet point answer, where we have 2 parts, security vulnerabilities are exposed, first mark, by someone who is paid, etc., 1 mark, right? And equally, we can say that if they had answered identify problems, flaws with the network, that too could have been supported by that second part, the first bullet point, second part, by someone who is paid, rewarded to do it. So simple mark scheme, points based, nothing complicated about it really. You're looking for statements at work there and so on. Right. How does that work when we're doing coding? Well, here, for example, is an example of coding, which is very simple to mark. It's another points-based marking system. It's on pages 3 page 3 of the sample questions booklet, right? And basically, the candidates are asked to open their file in the code editor. They have to amend it to show 3 program errors, then they have to save it. Okay. So what you're looking at there is the mark scheme, what we expect. So it's you need to bear in mind that that's not what they got. That's our mark scheme. This is what we're expecting them to do. And the 3 things we were looking for was on line 2 that they had set the total to 0. In the original code it wasn't. On line 5 they have introduced an if statement, and they have replaced it with the correct. They got the if statement, but it had a single equals. It needs a double equals, right? And the 3rd thing they had to correct was on line 8, where they had a print statement, and it hadn't been correctly indented. They had the print statement in their code, but they had to indent it correctly. Okay, so that's an example of a points-based marking scheme applied to coding, and a typical early question you might get on the paper, where the candidates have to correct things and so on. On a small point, people often ask about what codes to use when marking this. When you're marking students' work, you may find that Thonny is very helpful to you. It's the one which we find helpful, right? Thonny works in a great way in the sense that you can step through a candidate solution, which you can't always do with some of them, in quite detailed form. It really does burrow down to the very minute point. And that allows you to think where things are gone wrong. Obviously, on something like this, any program, any IDE would do, but just to let you know that anyway. Right. How do we devise a mark scheme? Well, basically, they have to be produced at the same time as the questions, which is a bit of a handicap, because sometimes the questions are written 2 or 3 years ahead of the exam. So, for example, the current 2005 and 2006 papers have been written. And that means that, interestingly enough, things might change technology-wise, which will be pulled into the answers. So whilst we have an answer scheme and we have what we're looking for, we also have to allow for the fact that we have to go back and revisit it at the time of the exam to see if something's changed, new things have come along, other things might have happened, or we can see that we're getting answers we weren't expecting. Right. A points-based one then, they do something, it's correct, they get a mark. Here's a points-based example, all right, for you, and this is on page 4 of the spec, right? So just let me get up to date with my paperwork. Right, in this mark scheme here, you have, all right, 2 possibilities, all right? You also have a 3rd possibility, which is shown in the additional guidance. Let's deal with that one first. In the additional guidance, it says correct answer only gains 3 marks. You think, what? But what we're saying basically, if all they've done is given the answer, they haven't shown any working whatsoever, and the answer is correct, they're going to get 3 marks. Okay? So therefore, if they've just come up with the answer, nothing else, they can have the full 3 marks. Now, it's rare to see that, but occasionally you do see someone who's gone straight from it. It does say show your working. So theoretically, we could get upset and say, but we told you to show your working, so we're not giving you. But the decision making is that we should always be positive, and the presumption is that if they've got the right answer, then they must have worked it out somewhere. They can't just plucked it from the air. They must have, they must have done some calculation on some bit of paper somewhere. So therefore, we're going to go ahead and award it. So therefore, that's one option. The other options are 2 given here under the answers. So the first one, we're going to give 1 mark, right, by converting 38 to binary. We're going to get 1 mark for flipping the bits, and we're going to give 1 mark for adding it and getting the right answer as a result. Okay, so that's how the 3 marks are allocated. Alternatively, you can see there, you can see that the formulae for using 2n, all right, is there, and we could do that. We didn't see that, to be honest. Almost everyone did the top one there. Okay, but it's there. We've anticipated it, and so on. Yeah, people are worrying about what's available. I did say at the start, maybe you didn't get it when you joined in, because we have gone up in numbers now, that recordings are taking, links and emails are taking a few days. But if apparently, and I'm saying apparently because I've never tried it, if you go in on the same link that you used to access the original session on Monday, all right, reuse that link again, you should be able to view the recording. So I think that might be what's happening. So just to let you know on that. Okay, moving on. Here's another points-based example question. In this case, this is on page 5 of the sample questions booklet, right? And is to do with pseudocode, all right? So they basically, if I ask you to look in the sample question booklet, you will see that we have something provided which we need to write a program to implement the logic in the pseudocode. The actual file that the candidate would have opened, called question 02A, is shown on page 6. On page 6 of the sample question booklets, you can see what the candidate would have seen, right, in the exam. They would have been seen these series of statements, comments, which are there to provide them with some structure to answer the question within. Okay, right? They have got the pseudocode provided, and that you can see on screen, and it's also on page 5 of the question booklet, sample question booklet. So they can start to see that with the aid of the prompts, the comments that are provided in the file, they have got basically 6 sections to work within to get their answer sorted out. And so if we go to, I think it's on the next page, this is a very straightforward marking product. The final Python code is shown there at the bottom of the screen. If you want to look at it in the answer booklet, it's sample question book, it's on page 9. Page 9 is the correct answer in Python code. If you're using C# or Java, that's there as well. And basically, there is 1 point for getting everything here right. Okay, so they're going to get, notice how the question marking scheme is applied. First of all, it says attempting to input country and print country. Sorry, I do apologize. That first one, as long as the code would do what we want, but unfortunately for some other reason it's not actually going to happen. In other words, their line of code is correct, all right, but they haven't quite got the whole thing together. They're going to get a mark for it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a finished product. If we can mark it from the code, right, then we will award the marks. So first things first, no candidate has to have a working solution to gain marks. We will award marks if we can see them clearly in the code, even though the whole thing, the whole package put together by the candidate doesn't work, maybe due to some error they've made. So the first mark, have they made some sort of attempt to input the country, request it, and print that country? The second one was, have they done something slightly more sophisticated? Have they printed the string plus country? So in other words, have actually got more value to it. And then we work on down. I'm not going to dwell on all this because we're coming back to this later. We will be coming back to this later. But you can see the concept anyway. So it is a mark for basically each bit of that. It doesn't mean that they haven't done the whole thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's something wrong at the start, but they got something right later on. All right, they just get it basically, and so they must just get on with it. Pretty straightforward. However, we come to this one. And if you want to look at this one, it's on pages 10 and 11, pages 10 and 11, right, of the sample question booklet. Pages 10 and 11 of the sample question booklets. Right, level space. This is the one that everyone finds very hard to get their head around. Here's the question. A team of researchers are studying urban wildlife. They have got some statements about the team and what they're doing. And then at the bottom of that, you're asked the task ask of the students is identify the storage medium most suitably for the team and justify why it best meets their needs. So again, in that underlining keywords, there's two really important keywords there. Identify, okay, that really is quite straightforward in the sense of we're asking you to make a choice. What storage medium would you use? But then justify it. Why would that be a good choice? In the mark scheme, you also get two other bits. The level descriptors are shown on screen now and are usually common right the way through all the papers. Okay, so they are not question dependent. They are broad statements about what the answer will be. Alongside that, you have the indicative content. Please, please, please understand, this is not the absolute content. In other words, nowhere are we expecting a candidate to come up with all the stuff in the indicative content. It would be impossible. We are just giving you some idea of the sorts of comments, observations, reasons that a candidate might come up with, right, and how they might express it. But this is not meant to be some sort of list of things they have to achieve. It's not like a points-based marking scheme where if they've talked about internet connections, they're going to get 1 mark. If they talked about devices that support mobile data, they're going to get another mark. It doesn't work like that. That's not how it works. We are looking here for some of that indicative content in the candidate's answer. We will judge then how well that fits with the level descriptors that are provided, right? And we'll now go back to those. Let's go back to the level descriptors. You've got 3 levels. These basically relate to groups of grades. So the lowest level are obviously the lowest grades in GCSE, the 1s, 2s and 3s. Level 2 is the 4, 5, 6s, and level 3 is the 7, 8 and 9 grades. Those are grades, you know, which obviously we're not dealing with here because we're talking about marks, but it's important to bear that in mind. It's important to get that in your head, right? That level 1 comments start at GCSE grade 1. So you've got to get that into your head and the rest of it. And level 3 comments tend to start at around, not precise in any way whatsoever, but around GCSE grade 7. So you're thinking really, actually, answers that come into level 1 are probably not going to actually make a pass mark at GCSE. So answers coming in at level 1 are below the pass mark at GCSE. Answers coming at level 2 are going to be sitting there just on the pass mark and higher. And level 3 is going to be the ones where you've got quite exceptional answers. So we're going to see a lot of level 1 answers, less of level 2 answers, and not very many level 3 answers. Okay, unless you've got some exceptionally talented students. So what else can we say? Well, if we'd also look at it, there are qualities to those levels that we can use in the back of our head. Please never ever tell anyone that these are ways to mark it. These are ways to guide you into marking it. So we have qualities to level 1. Basically, it will probably be chaotic. There will be all sorts of comments made. There'll be independent, obviously unlinked, what you might call the shotgun approach of basically just firing all sorts of answers. I know this, 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 and I know something else. But none of it's actually linked together in any form of argument. It's basically just a collection of ideas. So they might have, in answer to this question, they might have said, oh, they're going to use laptops. Full stop, nothing else to follow with it, just that's it, right? Next bit of the question is they'll need mobile data, all right? No explanation, no evaluation, just something they've done there, all right? It might be that they say they might have collaborative working, and you go, oh, that's good, but they haven't explained it. We've got no idea of what collaborative working is or how it would, what it means. But they've thrown in the word because they remember from their work that that's something about this sort of thing. So in other words, the candidate is basically trawling through their mind, throwing up any words they can find or phrases that they think might be relevant, all right? But there's very little structure to it. So it's what I would call chaotic. Going to level 3 at the other end, though, is that sort of feeling as you start to read, you go, wow, the candidate here knows what they're on about. They are really, really confident. They are giving you information. They're then supporting it by explanation and expansion. The arguments are being well developed. And you can see a logical conclusion coming up at the end of the whole thing. Don't always have to have a logical conclusion, but it's an element that can be in some questions. So this is a confident, all right, candidate, someone who really knows what they're doing and are on top of it. And then in between, we have the level 2 people. Okay, so that gives you some idea of how you might come into marking this question. Not how you mark it, but how you would come in. So it gives you some idea of how, well, which level do I start with? Because you need to start with one of the levels. The next question is, having sort of decided on that sort of very arbitrary opening thing, is, okay, I'm going to start at level 2. I should point out on this, I've just decided that the answer I've seen is level 2. I now have to decide, is it at the top of level 2 or the bottom of level 2? The statements there, the statements in those boxes are for the top mark in that level. Okay, so for 2 marks, they should have done everything that's basically in that statement box, or most of what's in that statement box. Okay, for 4 marks for level 2, they have to demonstrate adequate knowledge and understanding. They have to have some discussion. And for level 3, for 6 marks, they have to demonstrate comprehensive knowledge and understanding by selecting relevant knowledge and understanding of key concepts, and they have a well-developed discussion. So your next question is, okay, I have found a piece of work, I've looked at it, and having looked at it and checked the indicative content to say that yes, it's covered some of the indicative content, I think this is a fairly okay one. It's probably about level 2. So you're then asking yourself the question, does it fit with the statements or does it not quite fit? If it fits, you're going to give it 4 marks. If it doesn't quite fit, you'll probably give it 3 marks. Or you might even look and say, actually, is this so bad I need to drop to level 1 for something? Now, of course, the other small problem is that a candidate might well start their answer in level 1, and then with a flared, their brain gets going, it zooms up, and suddenly they're going to level 3. And so you're going to have to also think about compromise marks where you think, well, okay, yes, the opening paragraphs were very level 1, but then once they got underway, they were doing level 3 stuff. So maybe I'm going to have to award a mark in level 2 as a compromise. See what I mean? Okay, this is all theory. We'll do some practical on it shortly. Okay, so what happens with these mark schemes? Well, I'm not going to spend too long on this because I've been talking for far too long, right? But basically, as I think I mentioned, but I'm not sure because I've done 3 different training courses in the last fortnight. Each summer, I and a few other senior examiners spend an exciting 2 days sitting in a room somewhere, arguing over the mark scheme and deciding what we could accept or what's come up and done like that. What could examiners not get right? How can we help them to apply the mark scheme exactly as it should be? How can we help you to apply the mark scheme exactly as it should be? And so on. And so this is all carried out before we even get the markers in. And then another couple of days we have the markers in and we train them in marking the paper. So basically from the marking point of view, if you're a marker, you will expect to spend 1 or 2 days, all right, working through the mark scheme. And we're talking about days, not hours, days working through the mark scheme, trying to understand it. Anyway, it's time for me to shut up and let you get started on doing something. Okay, so here's the first one task. If you've got your booklet available, right, this starts on page 13 of the sample questions booklet, right, and here's the question. Some computers use virtual memory. Explain how virtual memory works. The command word here is explain, and as I told you before, we would be looking for that because element, a statement followed by an expansion. Here is the candidate's work. There's two candidates' work there. Now, you're going to need to do this from the sample question booklet because the mark scheme is in the sample questions booklet. So the mark scheme is on, the question is on page 13, the mark scheme is on page 13, and the candidate's work is on page 14. Okay, the question and mark scheme is on page 13, the candidate's work is on page 14. Okay, not long. I think 5 minutes should suffice because you've had a bit of introduction, but having heard what I've said, looking at the mark scheme, read the mark scheme quickly, see if you can apply it. What mark are you going to give, right? What mark are you going to give to candidate 1, script 1 and script 2, all right? And I'll give you the answers at, let's say, quarter to the hour. We'll go through and the rest of it. If anyone's feeling brave and wants to put their marks in the chat, then for any of this work we're doing from now on, it's always interesting to see. Probably not for this one because it's pretty straightforward, but as we get to the more elaborate marking ones, you might want to share what you've decided and see what other people are thinking. It's quite useful. Okay, I'll keep quiet. 5 minutes of peace and quiet for you all. Get on with it. Sorry, I realise we've got an awful lot of people join recently. The sample questions booklet is in the documents, which is in the resources folder at the bottom of the screen. On the Zoom screen, if you go to the bottom, go to resources, click on that, go to documents, this middle tab, and the last item in that list there is the sample questions booklet. You really badly need to download it. You can't do it otherwise. It'd be too difficult. So you've got to have that downloaded, got to have it open. If you want to have it printed, it's even better, but probably a bit late at this stage. But at least you can see it online. So some of you might be rushing off and getting a second computer now so you can do everything. And if you can't do it from there, Faina has put the link. There's another way of getting it. If you can't get it from the Zoom link, you can go to the link that she's now put in chat. So that's there for you if you're there. Sorry to interrupt. I'll be quiet now. Thank you to, I hope it's pronounced correctly, Oluwaleke, who has been brave enough to put up a mark. I hope other people might follow their example and put up some marks. Great, thank you. Thank you, Emma. That's two of you now been brave. Right, I think we'll proceed. Thank you for the two people who have put mark. This is one of those interesting things. You're all sort of very shy or nervous when, gosh, it's a very simple one to mark this. What you're going to be like when we get to the higher mark ones. If you were to ever come do marking for us or do the marking training, I should point out that you're going to be asked as part of the training as we're going along. I'd be saying to you, okay, what did you give that? And then we'd be having a bit of a discussion about, well, why is that good? Why is that bad? And hopefully we'd learn from that. So getting the mark right isn't the object of the exercise here today. Getting the mark is part of it, but the other is understanding why maybe you didn't get the right mark is far more valuable than getting it right. Okay, here's the first one, and it just get the lost it, I think. That will do. We'll have purple. Okay, oh, it's not very big, is it? Anyway, virtual memory works like RAM, okay, which is the second marking point and is fine, okay. And then intriguingly, they've actually done a mix and match answer. It uses pre-existing memory like a hard drive or solid state drive, which is mark point 3. So this is a mix and match, which is valid. You could accept it. They've given you a reason from the second marking point, supported by an expansion from the third marking point, 2 marks. Okay. And script 2, oh, sorry, I should have got rid of all the annotations. Ignore that. Oh, I hadn't realized that was going to happen. Right, hang on. Annotation. Oh, God. Why didn't someone warn me about this? I'm not going to use underlining anymore. I'll just use the cursor. Right, script 2, we have got something. When the RAM is full, all right, when the RAM is full, blah, 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 stored in virtual memory. So we got RAM and virtual memory, which is, all right, marking point 1. But if you look at marking point 1, it says virtual memory is used when RAM becomes full. It's only the first part. It only gets 1 mark. Even though it's split here in the question, it's not going to get 2 marks. So script 2 gets 1 mark for when the RAM is full, things are stored in virtual memory. Okay, moving on. We're on page 15. Okay, a 4-mark question. Right. Make sure I got the right one. Oh, hang on, no. Yes. Right. A 4-mark question. A text file is stored on a hard disk. The file holds information on one side of a sheet of paper. The sheet of paper is represented by a grid 80 columns wide, 56 rows long. Each cell contains a single 2-bit character. The file also contains 40 characters of metadata. The hard disk allocates space in blocks of 124 bytes. Construct an expression. So it finally gets what it's going to do to show the number of blocks required to store the file. You do not need to do the calculation. All right, you'll find this question on page 15, and the mark scheme is on page 16. The mark scheme is on page 16. Right, here's the candidate's work. There's script 1. There's script 2. Right, good luck. You've got just a couple of minutes on this one, say 3 minutes, to try and work out how many marks. Use the mark scheme. Don't really have to understand the question. In this case, just look at the mark scheme and see if it's in it. And the candidate's work is on page 17. Candidate's work is on page 17. Okay. So a few minutes look at this. This is a sort of interesting one. I like this question. Okay, I'm going to put you out of your misery. I bet you're having fun with the second one, which, by the way, gets a couple of marks. That might be thinking, what? Anyway, we'll come to that in a minute. First of all, we got to consider, have they given us the answer, which is 11? No. If they had done, they would have got 4 marks. Have they given us a mark between 10 and 11? They would have got 3 marks, even though we said don't do the calculation. But as I told you before, to get the right answer, they must have done the calculation somewhere. So we're going to. So our first marking point is for 80 times 66 by 2, right? And we have got that here. 2 by 80 by 66. So it's going to get 1 mark. Don't worry about the times 40 at the end of it. Where's my highlighter gone? Oh, right. Okay. So that's, go back. Sorry, I'm just learning this as we're going along. It's awful. Right. Okay. Then the next mark is for divided by 40 or divided by 80. Well, unfortunately, they've multiplied, so it's not going to work there. That's just there. All right. Then divided by 1024. Now, we've got to see how this count has done it. It's rather weird, but we're going to accept it. They have said that this bit here, that bit there, is the amount of bytes. They then put the amount of bytes in the next bit of the calculation and divided it by 1024. So they can get the third marking point there for a division by 1024. That's what they're implying there, right? And then they have to round it up. Now, they haven't shown that as an, but they've actually used the words rounded up. And even more importantly, all right, they've given an example. 1.2 would equal 2. All right, so they have gone to sort of give an example. So they get the third marking point, all right, for rounded up, even though it's written as a word. Okay, so that's how that one would work, and fairly straightforward, I think. Then we move on. No, we don't move on. Well, what's happened here? Let's just get rid of that. Sorry, so boom, 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 and turn off annotation. And here we go. What on earth is this? Okay, it takes an awful lot of working out in your head, but in the end, this got 2 marks, and you may be thinking it's just gibberish, but it's not. The whole thing is a normal calculation turned on its side, all right, and also, interestingly enough, all right, just to make life really complicated, they've used various things that we wouldn't normally expect. So basically what they're saying is that is not a dividing line. They just underlined it to link that. So the first expression is actually, this first expression here, because of that little arrow there, is 80 times 66 times 2. So it gets the first marking point, right? You then see that the next line, all right, continues this calculation, times 40, so it doesn't get it. So another arrow there. So they're actually writing out one expression here, 80 by 66 by 2 by 40. That's what they're actually writing. We can credit that first bit. They then place that with a divider. There you can see a dividing sign just there, right? Divided by 1024, right, which is there. So that gets the second mark. So there's 1 mark for that there, and there is 1 mark for that there. If some of you are thinking, oh, God, then you may think, oh, perhaps I won't sign up for doing marking after all, if we have to deal with issues like that. There you go. Right, sure you enjoyed that. As been pointed out several times, I think now, if you go back to the link you had for Monday, you can see the recording. Likewise, save today's link, and you can come back and see the recording after we finish. All right. Okay, moving on as time goes. So we're going to look at another one now, which is again a sort of a two-parter. Notice this time it's got 2 separate sections. We want the candidate to identify, all right, an email protocol. So we have an interesting problem when we get these. Supposing they choose the wrong protocol, but they justify it correctly, all right, then we're going to get problems. But so we're going to come back to that in a minute. So basically, we want them to identify an email protocol. And if you look on pages 18, 19 of the sample question booklet, you can see the question and the mark scheme. And then we have to justify it. Now, although it doesn't show it on the mark scheme initially, we are looking for 1 mark for the correct protocol, and then for a suitable expansion, followed it. If they get the wrong protocol, the mark scheme says, and knows what we wanted was IMAP, but if they give us POP3, we're not going to award it, but if their justification of a POP3 protocol is correct, they can have those marks. Are you with that? This is called follow-through. So the initial answer may be wrong, but the work that follows is correct for the answer they gave. All right. On this occasion, this is not always the case, but on this occasion, we're going to accept that. So here we have two more candidates. Script 1 is here. Script 2 is there. All right. And I leave you to have a look and see if you can agree. What we've done to make things speedy up, we have actually underlined in the text where we think marks can be awarded. Right. We have underlined where marks can be awarded in this case to help you, as you can see there and there, but you have to decide which mark is it and how you're going to award it. Okay, so have a look at those two, please. Again, it's just a quickie. I want to get on to the more demanding question next, but say just gone the hour, say 2 minutes past. We'll look at the answer to that one. 2 minutes past. Okay, folks, let's have a look at the two answers here. We did underline it for you so you can see what it is. It obviously gets 1 mark for IMAP at the start there. That's straightforward enough, right? And it only downloads the header of the email and local storage and only downloads the rest of the message when being viewed in the mark scheme. That coincides with second bullet point in the mark scheme, so that's fine. It gets 1 mark. Expansion takes up lots of storage of all of them. Doesn't want one email to take up lots of storage of all of them, which is pretty good. It's not quite well expressed, but it means there's limited storage, so it gets the second mark. Gets a second mark for limited storage. So it's the middle bullet point in the mark scheme. The fact that they don't have to download the whole email initially, and it doesn't take up too much storage. The second answer, again, 1 mark for IMAP. It gets sent to both smartphones and tablet computer, right? Is identical to the third marking point in the mark scheme. Doesn't often happen like that, but it's quite useful. And so therefore that gets it, gets the smartphone and tablet, and they get 1 mark for that, but there's no expansion of that. That's just a 1 mark answer. So, because it's a bit difficult to say what you do with it. Okay, that was the easy stuff. Now then, you're going to need to be very dexterous now, because the question is on page 21. The indicative content is on page 22, and the candidate's work is on page 23 and 24, and the levels-based mark scheme, just to make life really difficult, is on page 11. So I hope you were listening. You might want to write that down again now, because this is how it gets fun. Question is on page 21. The indicative content is on page 22. The 2 scripts you're going to mark are on pages 23 and 24, but for some bizarre reason, the levels mark scheme is back on page 11. We don't use the indicative content from page 11, that's a different question, but the levels mark scheme always stays the same. So you need to go to the second half of page 11 to get the levels descriptors. You have 2 scripts, here's script 1, here's script 2. And basically what you want to do is identify a mark for these based on the indicative content, which I pointed out does not have to be exclusive. It's not going to be all of it to get the mark, or you don't get the full marks just because you didn't cover all of it. And there is, if you're looking at the indicative content on page 22 now, if you're looking now, I haven't got a slide for this, but if you're looking on page 22, you'll see the indicative content's divided amongst 3 things: characteristics, uses, and ethical issues. So obviously for a higher mark answer, I would be looking for someone who at least has got examples from those 3 categories. There's always going to be an exception to the rule, but that would be a general guideline that I would expect some reference of characteristics, right, because it's in the question, some reference to uses, which is also in the question, and some reference to ethical issues. So going back to the screen, the slide show I've got here, if I was getting ready to do this one, I would be going, okay, I need to discuss, I need to talk about, all right, characteristics, uses, and ethical issues, right? And the question was, has many forms increasing impact on our lives? So I now have a context. So I've got to get these 3 things in the context of how does it impact on our lives? How does that impact on our lives? Okay, that's the question. The levels marking scheme on page 11, all right, basically says for level 1 it's going to be basic independent points. For level 2 there's going to be adequate knowledge and understanding, and as we pointed out for level 3 it needs to be pretty well structured and held together and stuff like that. As this is quite important and one of the more difficult ones, I'm going to give you till 15:15 to think about marking this. I should give you a hint. When I'm marking it, and I can do it on the screen, then I tend to underline key words, and in the margin I tend to put down a U if it's a use, a C if it's a characteristic, or an E if it's ethical. So I can then glance down the margin and see have they covered all 3 topics. Okay, but anyway, I'll leave that with you. and I wonder if I should give a bit longer actually because it's quite hard. Yeah, about 17 minutes past. Quarter of an hour to do it in. 17 minutes past. Okay. Okay, folks, hopefully you've had a chance. May not have got finished. I understand, but we have so much to do today. I can't really allow you any extra time. Just to answer a question that's come up, is there a document that maps the difference between the GCSE and the IGCSE content? Yes, it's on the Pearson page, the home page for IGCSE. There is a mapping document. Basically, 95% of the content is the same. So, in a sense, you're pretty safe. You might just possibly do something that doesn't need doing because it's on the GCSE. And on the IGCSE, the most important difference is on the IGCSE we have ciphers, which they don't have on the domestic GCSE. Okay, so now to look at these two questions. Here's the first one, and I'll just get the annotation sorted again. Right. I'll try. I can't do both in all this time, but I'll just show you the principle, and then hopefully you can use that principle to do marking in future. Artificial intelligence has become more and more important for various technologies in recent years, all very vague and general, not going to worry about it. It is currently being used to develop, right, financial monitors, driverless cars, facial recognition software. So that's three uses. They've identified 3 uses of artificial intelligence. So in the margin here, I would have put 3U. Okay. Artificial intelligence, where a program is when a program is capable of making human-like decisions. So it's defining it, but not really helping us a lot. It is often used with machine learning, so that system is able to improve itself. So we have system is able to improve itself is a characteristic of artificial intelligence, and so be good. We then go on. Its use in the development of driverless cars raises some ethical issues. So they've actually identified that they're going to talk about an ethical issue, such as when a crash is certain, how should a computer program get to decide who lives and dies? A bit dramatic, but it is an ethical issue. They're talking about, when does a computer take over, and maybe it could take over wrongly and stuff like that. So we can imply that there. Okay, so that is an ethical. So now we've actually had 3 examples of uses, 1 example of characteristic, and 1 example of an ethical issue. We read on, all right. And in the future, it's very possible AI will replace humans for various jobs. Okay, so that's an ethical issue. Unemployment coming up there, another ethical issue. And then we go. Most people now interact with artificial intelligence on a daily basis, as it's present in so many forms of software, such as, all right. And then again, they have got examples of use: search engines and social media networks. Okay, so I have got in total for this candidate 5 examples of uses. I've got a characteristic, and I've got 2 ethical issues. If I look at the levels marking scheme, which is on page 11, then I can say all of that is valid indicative content, so that's fine. So I'm looking at that, I think, well, that's pretty comprehensive. So therefore, I'm going to start in level 3. It demonstrates comprehensive knowledge and understanding by selecting relevant knowledge and understanding of key concepts, principles, right, to support the discussion being presented. I'm pretty good with that. I'm happy with that. The discussion shows a well-developed, sustained line of reasoning that is clear, coherent, and logically structured. And I'd argue, yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy to give that 6. I'm happy to give that 6. There's a lot there that the candidates put together in a very small space of time. Notice, of course, we have to allow the fact they're working in an exam. They haven't seen this and had time to think about it in advance. So they are just coming up straight over the answers. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good. The second one, second script, because this weird thing, I have to take the annotation off. The second script here is not quite as good, but it has some useful bits, and we'll just quickly point those out. It has a use in the second. Oh, go away. That AI is very common in the modern day. Most people have one like Siri. There's a use of AI on their phone. All right, blah de blah de blah. Then it goes down. They tend to be very helpful and useful, fast and aid is simple chores like setting game timers or calling someone. So setting timers, yeah, that's okay. And or they can call someone, that's all okay, fine like that. They are especially useful as they would respond to voice, allowing others to do multiple things at the same time. Right, many people find them to be useful due to this. However, some of them also have doubts. So, it's not really getting anywhere. And we need to go back to the question just briefly. The question said, what was very important was impact on our lives. Are they looking at impact on our lives? Well, I think they are. Yes, that's okay. Explain to your voice. Here we have. They must always be in order to respond to your voice. They must always be listening. So that's an ethical issue. Not very well expressed, but we get what it once we think about it, we're there. And then AIs are ethically okay as they can be considered an invasion of privacy of someone does right there. That's an ethical issue you could come up with, and so that would be another one there. So in this answer here, we've got two uses near the start. We've got a couple of ethical issues. They haven't really talked about characteristics. And you feel it's well written, but it's not got quite the wow factor of the previous one either. So the fact that they've left out one of the critical elements, they've left out a description of the characteristics of what the question asks for, really bars them from level 3. But it's certainly plenty good enough for a top mark in level 2. Right? If you'd thought about giving it 5, I would have understood. If you've gone and given it anything less than 3, then I'm very worried. There is stuff there. It's just you've got to try and pull it out. Sometimes it takes a bit of looking at before you can actually see what they're talking about. So there we go. Okay. Right. We will move on. That was paper 1. Hopefully you've got enough to go on there. I do appreciate this is all a bit of a rush. And so, it's being recorded. You can go back to recording and you can do it at your own pace. Okay, back to the start again, back to the idea of points-based marking and so on. And this would be example one we talked about earlier, if you remember, where they have to correct something that's wrong in the code. So it's the same as we looked at earlier. I'm not going to dwell on it earlier. It's just another example of where the code's wrong. They have to write it, get it right, and you get the marks for getting it right. So let's move on to something a bit more useful. And this is on page 28 and 29. 28 and 29. It is actually a remarkably simple question to do. They basically have to work out how sales assistant, I can't say the word, can earn a bonus based on the number of pairs of shoes they sell and the total income from the shop each day. So if the shop income is more than £5,000 or the sales assistant has sold at least 10 pairs of shoes, they're going to get a bonus of 10% of salary. If the shop income is £2,000 or more that day and the sales assistant has sold at least 5 pairs of shoes, they'll get a 5% bonus. So you might already twig that this is going to be a greater than, less than exercise, and so on. The supplied code looks, no, that's the answer. I haven't got it. So basically, this is the question. Here is the correct answer, right? That's the correct answer, and we haven't got the candidate's work. The candidate's work is on page 20, page 30. Candidate's work is on page 30, which actually is on my slides, it says. No, it's not. Okay. So candidate's work, page 30. Okay. You're only going to need a couple of minutes to mark this. The correct answers, all right, are shown on pages 28 and 29. Okay, with the mark scheme. So just have a look. I'll give you 2 minutes on this one. Sorry, this is the candidate's answer. Okay, just quickly, they have got this here, greater than 5,000, which was the first criteria. But the assistant sales equals 10. It should have been, all right, it's at least 10, so this should have been, all right, greater than or equal to 10, so they don't get it there. On this one, shop acre was 2,000 or more, all right, and so they've done a greater than equal to, right, and that's correct. That one had to be more than, this one had to be greater than and equal to, so that's correct there. And they've made the same error again, right? It should have been greater than or equal to 5, and so they don't get it. So they get 2 marks. But that raises an interesting point about candidates knowing how to use greater than, less than, equal to, and so on. So, right, okay. Take that off. Here's one that goes with pseudocode. Again, you have got a response there. The pseudocode is on page 31. Pseudocode's on page 31 with the question. So basically, they're given all the structure of the question, and the mark scheme is on page 32, and it also shows on page 32 what when you open the folder, the file for this question, what it would have looked like. So question 2A has actually 4 comments in it, and that's it, and the candidate has to fit their answer in between them. All right, and then they have to work out that they're going to get point marks for various things. So the mark scheme is a point marking scheme. Okay, it's a point marking scheme, and the candidate's answer is on page 34. The candidate's answer is on page 34. So, all right, the correct answers are on page 33. Don't mark that one. Well, you can mark if you want, it gets 10. The correct answers are on page 33. The candidate's answer is on page 34. Okay, so have 5 minutes of looking at that, please. 5 minutes looking at that. That's the one you're meant to be marking. I'm always left with a great dilemma here, whether to give you more time but not do everything that's on the materials, or to rush you ahead because we got so much to look at. I think we need to move ahead anyway. So, okay, this one we have the first bullet point was to on the mark scheme was to set counter to 1 and guess to 0. Actually, the answer is in two places. It's there. There's one bit, and there's the other bit. So they have done that. Fine. Bullet point 2, set answer to random value between 1 and 10, and you might go quickly, oh yes, but no, they've made an error there. It should be randint, not random int. So you don't get the second one there. Okay. Right, request input, yeah, that's here. This is mark point 3. All right, and accept an integer value for guess. Well, they've got an integer there, that's fine. They have a request there, but they haven't assigned it to guess. So they don't get the mark for that one there. Create a while loop, all right. That's there. While loop is being created there. That's fine. With a correct condition. Unfortunately not. The condition there is wrong. So that there is the wrong condition. So that's a that's not going to get that one, even though they got the while loop started. They haven't actually got the correct condition, so it doesn't get the second part. Increment the counter. That's there. That's fine. That's okay. All right. Use if-else selection to determine and display appropriate output message for incorrect guesses. Right. So they've got if-else here, and they have got a print statement which gives, right, the guess and therefore thing. Now you might be going, well, hang on, they haven't assigned anything to guess. They didn't assign it. So, but we're doing follow through. Yes, they got it wrong here in terms of they didn't get that complete. They've got this wrong here, it wouldn't actually work and so on. But this element here, this little if-else bit here, right, that bit there is good. We can give a credit for that because they have done what we wanted them to do. Right? All right. Then question 7, requests another guess. Unfortunately, is here. This is what they were intending it to be. But it is outside the loop, this loop here, so it's not going to get the mark. All right, then they don't get mark point 8 because obviously it's not going to display the correct guess. But they have got, this is the important thing, the question says, all right, the mark scheme says, display correct guess and count of guesses. Well, they have got the display element, print you guessed in and the number of guesses, all right? And it would basically do something. It would display something, but not the right answer. All right. We've got to allow follow through. That's again another follow through. So it's there. If it had been right elsewhere, it would have worked correctly. So we can give the mark there. Does it compile without syntax errors? No, it certainly doesn't. All right. It stops at line 7. Right. That gives you, after that, it doesn't do anything. And does it work? No, so it doesn't get bullet point 10. Okay, that's how that would work out. Someone's raised their hand. Is a student, is that the answer? Oh, I don't know. No, they've got to get this. We have, that's the reason they can't have it. Sorry, this is to answer the question Shabina asked, is it allowed to mix up programming statements and pseudocode? No, it's not. They've been given the pseudocode, they're expected then to translate that into programming language so that they can't have it, okay? That's one of the points about this qualification. I should point out, by the way, these are usually very well answered in the exam. It's rarely we have problems with this type of question. The candidates are very good with this sort of thing, where they've got the pseudocode and they just got to rewrite it. Better in recent years as well, so that's good. Okay, hope that was okay. Turn it off. All right, I'm going to have to skip over one. I'll just briefly look at it with you. All right, but this was an example of, I'll mention something completely different here. This is where they have to find out if there's an email in the list of email addresses. Is it a valid test? And the way they're going to test if it's valid is by looking for the @ symbol. So it's not perfect. Obviously, it's still not actually checking that it's a real email, but it's an idea anyway. I've forgotten now. It got that one we just done. It got 1.1. That's 1 mark. It got 5, 6. That's 1, 2, 3. It got bullet point 4. Looks like 4 for that one. I'm doing that very quickly. I might have missed a mark, but I think that's it. Okay, I'm worried now. I'll go back and make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 marks. Right, this one, I'll just kind of this a very important bit. The basic thing is, if they know how to open and close files, there is often going to be a mark for that. And for example, if you look on page 35 now, page 35, you'll see that the first mark is file opened for input, right? And then second mark is file opened for output. And then 6th mark, close files. Okay, close files. So amazingly, all right, this can get a lot of marks, right? Because they have just got to get the right commands in, right? So they have going to get credit for very, very little coding indeed for some of the marks, okay? So do remind candidates, and this is where we get a lot of problems. We get a lot of file handling questions are not done well. And the candidates need to spend a lot more time on doing these and all the rest of it. And a small point, in their final submission, they got to remember to include the file, the text file, whatever it might be, in their answer folder. If they haven't, we have to add it, which is just annoying. Okay. Oh, sorry, Nazir thinks it's 5. I'll take your word for it, Nazir. I can't go back on it now, but probably 5. Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah. Obviously, we're a little bit more concerned if it's real marking. Anyway, so in this one, this is just here to illustrate how knowing how to open and close files correctly can often earn you 2 or 3 marks. And we do mean correctly. They got all the correct things. So that's a useful bit of knowledge. Even you couldn't program. If you knew you had to put open file at the start and close file at the end, you could possibly pick up 2 or 3 marks. Okay, we're arguing over it, 4 or 5. I thought it was 4. Life's too short, I'm afraid, guys. We've got to get on. So here we go. Right, so we're not going to do that one. It's just there. We're going to go on because I want to get on to the next one, which is much more important. Right. Okay. This is where we start to move from correcting things to actually getting the students to actually write code from scratch or code from beginning, so on. You're looking at pages 38 and 39 in the spec sample questions booklet. And this is where we start to get a mix and match of marks, so that there can be marks for something working or not working. We can be coding and not coding, and so on. I haven't got time because we have a very important one to look at next, which we'll need at least 10 minutes to look at. So I'm just going to tell you the answers to this one, all right? And so just make a note of this, please. This is the response. For line 4, they get bullet point 1. They've done line 5 incorrectly, so they don't get bullet point 2. All right. Lines 7 and 8, they get bullet points 3 and 4. Bullet point 5 is a syntax error, so they can't have that. The error is on line 5. There's a syntax error on line 5. So bullet point 5, which was compiles and runs, they don't get. And bullet point 6, efficient in terms of computation, not efficient, right? There's an additional else in line 13. There's an additional else in line 13 that's not needed, right? They could have just, So that's how we would regard efficiency. Yeah. Yes, it would work, but it's not needed. So therefore, they don't get that one on line 13. So to recap, line 4 gets bullet point 1. Line 5 doesn't get bullet point 2 because it's not right. They do the calculations on lines 7 and 8, so they get bullet point 3 and bullet point 4 for displaying them. Okay, they don't get bullet point 5 because there's a syntax error on line 5, and they don't get bullet point 6 because they used a redundant else on line 13. Okay. I had to keep ahead because we're coming to this, and this is the biggie. This is question 5. It's the large one at the end. It's a levels marked question, and we haven't looked at levels marking for the coding questions. Here's the script. Where's the levels marking gone? No, it's not there, is it? Okay. It has got points-based marking and levels-based marking. Okay. So here's the question, and you need to be on pages 40, 41 and 42. Okay, 40, 41 and 42. They've been given a library program, and basically they've got to identify who's actually borrowed the most books, or if you like, read the most books, but we don't know that. They might have borrowed them and not read them. And we're going to give gold, silver and bronze medals to those people who have read the most books. We also want to work out how some averages and calculations and so on. And so we have, in this one, we have 11 marks, which are bullet point marks, right? Those are on page 41, But at the end, we have a further 9 marks, all right, for levels marking, and that's what I want to dwell on at the moment, because I think we can all do bullet point marking. So can you look at page 42 in the sample questions booklet, page 42, right? This is where we have to think about looking at the final completed code, what the candidate has finally done. And we have 3 bands, 3 marks in each band. And some of the things I said about levels marking for paper 1 also apply to levels marking for paper 2, in the sense that mark band 1, right, will be a pretty messy solution. It will be bits and pieces that work, perhaps bits that don't work. They've had some good ideas, but the whole thing probably doesn't hang together, right? And that will be enough to say. And almost certainly it won't run, okay? That will be mark band 1. By mark band 2, we do expect it to run and function, but maybe it wouldn't necessarily work with everything. If we brought some new data in or something like that, it wouldn't work. And you can see that with comments provided by candidates that it's going to be probably fairly logical in its approach. It's not until we get to mark band 3 that we actually see something that not only runs, but looks like it's doing a good job, it's efficient and so on. So again, we can still use those 2 descriptors, the chaos of mark band 1 and the confidence and competence of mark band 3. Okay, again, the statements, that list of statements there, massive list of statements on page 42, is indicative in the sense that we can't necessarily expect them to meet all of those all of the time for a band. So the statements are for the top of mark band 1, the top of mark band 2, and the top of mark band 3. So if you are, for example, looking at work in mark band 3, and you can see that they have decomposed it very well, the logic is good, right? But there's a few issues with the use and manipulation of data types. You're not too happy the way they've done that, but they have put in good coding. They have put in comments to support their coding, right? And it runs nicely, and you could perhaps use it with another data set. So you think, oh, that's a shame. So it's going to be an 8. You know, it's missed one of those points. It hasn't done very well on use and manipulation of data and so on. So you would then have to think in terms of that. I'm not going to ask you to mark this one. People raising hands, but unfortunately we can't do anything with that on this one. Just put it in the comments, please. If you've got a question, put it in the comments. But we're going to look and just show you how it would be marked and give you some idea. I'm going to talk you through it basically. We haven't got time for you to actually sit down. But if you have open with you at the same time, both page 42 and 41, let's have a look at the first one. Here's script 1. They have initialized some variables. They have then worked out some ideas of how they would do the book count and the averages coming up here. And then they've got some output here. This thing in the box here is what actually, if you run the program, this is what you got. So that stuff in the box down the bottom is what would happen, what happened when we ran this candidate's program. All right, and so on. And that's there. So how does it look? Okay, it initializes variables. It doesn't do it for variables for gold, silver, and bronze. If you look back here, you've got total books, low books, readers book count, gold medal, all right, equals, but nothing for bronze or silver. Okay, there's a loop for identifying and printing those borrowing fewer than 10 books. Okay, if students borrow less than 10, blah de blah, put them in that list. Okay, that's there. Oh, sorry, gone the wrong way. There is a printout of appropriate details, must include the pupil ID. The printout, on average, these are the IDs of the students who read less than 10 books. So you can see it from the actual outcome, but you can also see the print statement there on lines 49 and 50. All right, so they have done that one. All right, again, I've gone the wrong way. Print out total number of books borrowed and print out average number of books borrowed. I do both of those at the same time because there they are. They have read, on average, the students read 42 books and 846 books have been ordered. Okay, so that was okay there. But then the rest of it, gold, medal, and silver, well, they didn't do that. They didn't do any of that, so therefore it's not going to get marked. So they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marks for getting the marking point answers right. So how do we then look at their code? Well, the coding is quite good, but one thing you'll notice straight away is the absence of any comments. The candidate hasn't given me any indication of what their coding is like to do, and this is really, really common problem, right? Please get your students to understand that they do need to comment their work at the higher level. Not excessively, not comment every other line, but they might, for example, put a comment in at the start here on line 32. They could have put a comment in that this bit of code here is going to work out the opening statements we require, number of books, average number of books, and so on like that. Okay, so they could have put a comment in there. Going back, I keep going the wrong way. Okay, so that's something we're going to look at. So logic's clear. The manipulate data, it seems to be coded. Code is mostly clear and readable. It functioned and worked, all right, and it's meeting some of the requirements. Okay, meeting some of the requirements. So we're sitting there thinking, oh, right, okay, what are we going to do with that? All right, so it's this one, and we'll think about, we've got 5 marks from here, and it's not very comfortable on mark band 2, but mark band 1 I think would have been a bit drastic because it is a working program and it did run when we ran it. So we're going to give it 4 marks, making a total of 9 marks for this candidate. Where's it gone? There, script 1. So we're going to give 9 marks for this. Okay. Then looking at the second candidate. Okay, this is their output here in the box on the right here, and they have identified the winners. They have identified how many books are read, they've put average, and they got the codes of the people that read less than 10. Not quite as good as we might want because it says read fewer than 10, just a number. It'd been better if they had put library ID or something there, would have been good, but so on. So that will be that part of it. In terms of marking it, they've initialized the variables for all of those things, the gold, silver count, and that's there. All right, places, they've done all that sort of thing. Okay, that's been done. They create a loop for printing it and print out the appropriate details. Now again, we can sort of judge this from the fact that it works. In other words, we don't actually have to read all the code. We can actually see that happens. all right? But sometimes, of course, it doesn't run, and you have to go back and read the code and decide from the code. Just because it doesn't run doesn't mean they can't have credit if the code is correct. Something else has gone wrong, that's fine. Okay. So anyway, so it's going to do all those things. We've identified the winners, all right, and at least one gold one is printed minimum, last name or first name, yes. Details all three medal winners, yes, that's there. Oh, sorry, that way. There they are. It's all red there. It's all brilliant, perfectly fine. But also, more importantly, we could have looked at the code and seen that the code would do that. All right. I must emphasize, it doesn't have to work for any of these marks. All right. It just has to be that sometimes it's easier if it does work because you can just see it straight away. Okay. Obviously, a much better answer than last time. We look in the fact that it does seem to have done everything we wanted to. All right. But the one thing we didn't have in this candidate and which we hadn't had on the previous candidate is any comments. And for that reason alone, the fact that they haven't actually helped me through the code, they haven't told me what this bit of coding is doing, they haven't told me what this bit of coding is doing, it's not going to get 9, it's going to get 8. It's going to get 8. So 8 plus 11, I think, making 19. All right, is that right? Sorry, I forgot what the overall mark for this question was. It's 1 mark off whatever the total mark was. Yeah, 19 out of 20. 19 out of 20. That's correct. Okay, well, this you all saw last time, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But there is the page on computer science where you can find out things. And the person asked about the mapping scheme. It's on that page somewhere. All right, the mapping thing. We talked about these things last time. I won't dwell on those either. So I'll go there. There's the book that we mentioned. This, again, if you haven't copied it down, please copy it down. This is your subject advisor in the UK. Contact him on teachingcomputerscience at pearson.com, or if you happen to be doing the ICT as well, then contact him on teachingict at pearson.com. That's Tim Brady. Send him messages. That's it from me because it's a bit of a run, but I have just left 5 minutes for questions. Please type fast and briefly if you have a question. We'll try and answer it before we finish at 11 o'clock. I really hope it's been useful to you. Please hang around to see what people are asking, and then we'll wrap things up in about 5 minutes' time. So it's over to you. Send us any questions you still have. Right, interesting question. No, there's no reason why the second mark there's no official reason why it shouldn't exceed the previous mark, but obviously, given the nature of things, it's unlikely. In other words, if they haven't got many marks for the coding, the first part, it's highly unlikely the work's going to be of a level where they're going to get high marks. Bear in mind that to get level 2 and level 3, the program has to work. So that is obviously going to constrict them somewhere. But actually, there's no rule, there's no reg that says it, but just, yes, as you say, it's just basically the nature of the beast that you're not likely to get a high levels mark followed by from a low points-based mark because you haven't met the criteria. To record this, when you go out, leave this, come back in, give us time. The recording has to be processed, by the way. So don't go just logging back in straight away after this. But if you log back in tomorrow using the link you used today, you should be able to view the recording. Right, well, we're quite strict on our 2 hour limit, so I'm going to put things together. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it was useful to you, and that obviously, although we did go at quite some speed, because you have the recording, you can go back at your leisure and perhaps take it from there. And that's it from us. So thank you very much, guys. If you want to say goodbye, you're welcome. And then we can wrap things up in a couple of minutes.